Hello, it's 9 p.m. in RTD. It's time to English New Edition for tonight headlines. So we have the delegation of the international observers meet with Djibouti authorities. For the international scene, Brazil news sad record 4,000 dead in 24 hours concerning the COVID-19. Welcome to our newsroom. As usual, you will follow the special edition dedicated to the election campaign immediately right after this news with our colleague Hidayah Mohammed joining us on the other side. So Hidayah, tonight is the last meeting for the presidential campaign. What are the headlines of the day between our two candidates?
Thank you, Mohammed. As you know, the election campaign is in full swing. And for our edition of tonight, Wednesday, April 7, we will report on the retrospective of the meetings of the independent candidate. As for the UMP candidate, today marks the last day of his meetings where he meets the public at the Goulet Stadium, and we will certainly give you more details in the development of this special election edition. Thank you.
Thank you, Hidayah. And the President of the National Assembly, Mohamed Ali Hamad, received this Wednesday, April 7, 2021, in the lounge of honor of the Parliament, the courtesy visit of the observations mission of the African Union, Arab League, IGAD, organizations for the delegation of observers was led by Dr. Ahmed Tidjane Souare, former Prime Minister of Guinea. This meeting was an opportunity to discuss the electoral process, the observation of the presidential elections of April 9, in accordance with the relevant provisions of the African Charters on Democracy, Elections and Governance, the organizations of the African Union Declaration of the Principle Governing Democratic Elections in Africa, and the African Union guidelines for election observations and monitoring missions, as well as the Constitution and laws of the Republic of Djibouti. In addition, President Hamad recently led a legislative elections observation mission to the Netherlands and shared his experience and the latest development and practices in the Western countries. The delegation of observers from the African Union, the Arab League, and the organizations of Islamic Conference met this morning with the main Djiboutian authorities. The delegation of the international observer, led by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, was present at the meeting. The international observers delegation, led by Dr. Ahmed Tidjane, former Prime Minister of Guinea, and including several members, went first to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, where it held discussions with the Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mohamed Ali Hassan, in the presence of the Djibouti Ambassador to Ethiopia and African Union, Mr. Mohamed Idris Farah. After a presentation, the discussions focused on the Djibouti government's role in the development of the country. After a presentation, the discussion focused on the observations of the presidential elections scheduled for Friday, April 9, in accordance with the provisions in forces in Africa, in the Arab and Islamic countries, as well as in the IGAD countries. On the day of the vote on Friday, April 9, observers will be deployed in the file and in the polling stations to observe the presidential elections process between two candidates. The outgoing President Ismail Omar Guelleh is the candidate of UMP coalitions, and independent candidate Zakaria Ismail Farah is running for the presidency. The observer delegation met this morning with the Interior Minister Mumin Ahmed Sheikh in his office. The observer delegation was led by Dr. Ahmed Tidjane, former Prime Minister of Guinea. The meeting was an opportunity to discuss the electoral process, the observation of the presidential elections of April 9, in accordance with the relevant provisions of the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance of the African Union Declarations of the Principle Governing Democratic Election in Africa, and the African Union Guidelines for the Elections Observation and Monitoring Missions. The discussion focused primarily on the means. The minister assured them the full deployment of the security. The minister added that each team observer will be deployed. The Minister of Justice, His Excellency Ali Hassan Bahdoun, received this morning in his office delegation of observers from the African Union. The delegation of observers was led by Ahmed Tijan Soare. This meeting was an opportunity to discuss the electoral process in the observationists. Then the delegation of the observers of the African Union met the Minister of Women and Family, Moumina Hummel Hassan, received this morning the observer missions for the presidential election to be held on Friday, April 9. The delegation of the observer was led by Dr. Ahmed Tidjan. This meeting was an opportunity to discuss the electoral process in the observations of the presidential election in accordance with the relevant provision of the African Charters on Democracy, Elections and Governance of the African Union Declaration on the Principle Governing Democratic Election in Africa, the African Union guidelines for electoral observation and monitoring missions, as well as the constitutions and laws of the Republic of Djibouti. The discussion focused on the ways and means of conducting the elections. The Minister of Women and Family assured them of her full availability. The observer delegation from the African Union, Arab League and organizations of the Islamic Conference met with the National Communication Commission, Sayang Institution, chaired by a woman, Ms. Ulufa Ismail Abdo, and comprising several members, including women commissioners. The delegation of observer was chaired by Mr. Ahmed Tidjan, former Prime Minister of Guinea, in the presence of the observer from the Caribbean League. The discussions were intense and very instructive for the delegate who discovered the missions on the CNC, and the legal instrument of the institution is an institution that is the guardian of the information and is responsible for ensuring pluralism and information and equitable access for candidates in both the audiovisual and print media. Observer asked questions about information pluralism and fairness in the traditional media and social networks, and were very satisfied with the answers of the member of the CNC, who do a remarkable job for ensuring the information is then the CNC must manage to ensure pluralism and information during the presidential election set for April 9, 2021. The chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Farwa Abdullahi Waliye, received today in the afternoon a delegation of observers from the organizations Arab League and IGAD, the People's Palace. After the warm welcome, the president of the CENI gave a brief presentation to the observer on the missions and roles of the commission he needs. It should be recalled that the mission of CENI is to supervise, control, and impartiality of conduct of electoral operations before, during, and after the presidential election is scheduled for next Friday, April 9, 2021. As part of the World Health Day marked by the pandemic of COVID-19, His Excellency the Minister of Health made a statement on the airwaves of the radio television of Djibouti, whose theme is chosen this year is Fear and Heart Fair Wall. The Minister of Health, Mohamed Warsama Diriye, said in his speech that the government has put all the means to contain the epidemic but also mitigate the important socio-economic consequences. Each year, April 7, offers the opportunity to pause and reflect on the health issue that affect our population the most. The World Health Day is in 2021 is part of the health context marked by a second epidemic wave. The chosen themes are fierce and healthier world. Recall the observation made at the global level more than a year after the beginning of the health crisis linked to the COVID-19 pandemic. The vulnerabilities of our society have been revealed more than ever, and its inequality highlighted. The efforts undertaken in the national response against COVID-19 have been unanimously welcomed by the international community. Following the presidential decree making the wearing of masks mandatory in all enclosed public places, but also outside of the entire national territory. Since masks are not free, these health measures may be difficult to comply with for people with modest incomes. It is this perspective is that the Ministry of Health has launched yesterday a major distribution operations of more than 1 million surgical masks for all the pharmacies in the city of Djibouti at the estimate prices of 15 Djibouti franc per unit and 20 for resale to the population. It should be recalled that the government has kept the sale of surgical masks at 20 Djibouti franc. The services concerned will control the answer does not exceeded that the Minister of Health, Mohamed Warsama Diriye, said that our country has a substantial stock to avoid any shortage through our supply strategy. The sports stadium of the development complex of Al-Rahma in the township of Balbala hosted yesterday afternoon the final of the soccer tournament between Arab private school in Djibouti, supervised by the Ministry of National Education and Vocational Training under the auspices of Abu Ahmed Group. The closing ceremony of this tournament was attended by the Secretary General of the Ministry of National Education and Vocational Training, Muhammad Abdallah Mahyoub, the owners of the Abu Ahmed Group, Hajj Abdurrahman Ahmed Taha, as well as the director of the NGOs, Al-Rahma Abdul Ghani Al-Qureshi, and the Secretary General of the Arab League schools in Djibouti, in addition to the coordinators of the tournament, the director of the Islamic School of Al-Najah, Yasser Al-Shamiri, the team of the complex, Al-Rahman and Imam of Al-Shafi'i school meet in the final match of this tournament that brought together 11 teams. The team Al-Rahma school won this championship with 6 goals against only 2 goals for the school Al-Imam Al-Shafi'i. It is with great sadness that we learn the death of Miss Hasna Sikiye Diriye, born in 1952 in Al Sabih. The deceased leaves behind her 2 children and a great child. The deceased Hasna Sikiye Diriye was the mother of Hussein Hassan Heriye, the head of the villages of Galilee. May God the merciful grant peace to her soul in his eternal paradise. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And for the international scene, Brazil recorded a new and sad record, 4,000 deaths in 24 hours. It must be said that there is a certain confusion between local, regional, and national decisions that are sometimes contradictory. The inhabitants no longer know what is open and what is not. A year ago, the Supreme Court ruled that the states and the municipalities were free to adopt whatever measures they wanted in response to the pandemic, and at the top of the state, President Jair Bolsonaro seems to be ignored calls for containment. He regularly opposes such health restrictions, arguing that it penalizes the economy too much. This is it for the news. Thanks for watching us. Let's follow with Hidayah Muhammad.